Hello everyone, this is Tony. Welcome back to my channel, Trophy Food Experiences. Today with the news that Vancouver and Toronto are going to be listed and have their own Michelin guides, I thought I'd do a video on Michelin, the guides, and just kind of explain the history and how restaurants are rated. Michelin is actually a tire company. And I think you have seen them around. They've got this logo with this, it looks like a tire guy. So that's the same Michelin. So Michelin Tire Company actually was founded in the 1900s. And they produced this, initially the guide in the 1900s, just for France. With the idea at that time in the 1900s, you know, there wasn't as many cars, as much roads. It was just starting. And so they wanted to encourage people to drive more. And I guess if they drove more, then they would have to use tires and their tires would get worn out more. So they would sell more tires. So the whole basis of this was just as a guidebook or a map book. And what they were trying to provide to drivers was just maps. There were maps and then places where they could go for basically hotels at first. They only started to start reviewing restaurants in the 1920s, so they added that to the whole process and then started giving out stars. They started out rating restaurants, and we'll go through ratings on a star system, 3 stars, 2 stars, and 1 stars. They've added a Bibendium or Bib Gourmet, and Bibendian or Bib is that logoed man in the logo of the Michelin Tire Company. So that's for value. And then they also have a green star for those restaurants that have great food, but also for sustainability. It's also, they also list a lot of hotels and restaurants in the guide itself for each city. They may not be starred, but even a mention of them in the guide is helpful because so many people rely on this guide. I'll mention that the guide is actually a physical book, but also can be obtained online. I think that you can actually pay for it, but from what I've done all the time, I've always just been able to just access it. I don't know if that's going to change in the future, but that guide is useful, and it really, I think a lot of travelers do use it. I know that when I travel, I do check Michelin, I check the restaurants for sure, and what's listed in there. And even if I can't book a Michelin star restaurant, I will look at the Bib Gourmets, or I'll look at other ratings, and they will have a short description. Even if you don't have a star, they'll have a short description of that restaurant, which probably has a lot of value for that restaurant. A lot of people think that the guide actually makes a ton of money. Michelin doesn't care about the actual expense of the guide, and in fact, some people say they actually lose money on the Michelin guide. The reason being is that there's some studies that show that wherever they have this Michelin guide, tire sales actually increase. And even though they can increase by very little, maybe a couple of percentage, the amount of tire sales that Michelin sells is in the billions. So it's actually a marketing tool for them because it gets their name out there, Michelin. And so it's kind of subconscious, and it's funny to say, it makes their tires more marketable. So it's really that they want people to buy more of their tires rather than the Michelin guide. In recent years, because of the popularity of the guide, I think it's not as expensive. They don't lose as much money. They probably break even and probably eventually will actually start making money because it's such a big thing. But it's not a huge money maker for them. It's more as an additive to their tire sales, which is their major business. So a local example for comparison is the Vancouver Playhouse and their association with the Wine Festival. The Vancouver Playhouse doesn't make the majority of their money from the Wine Festival, but it puts light on the Playhouse and it gets their name out there. So it's an additive. Of course, their major revenue comes from the Playhouse and plays, but this Wine Festival makes them more accessible to the public and gets that name out there. And that's very similar to Michelin and the Michelin guide. So how does Michelin rate restaurants? They have these they call them inspectors. So they're anonymous people that go to restaurants to eat and write reports. And it's not people like me. It's not just regular people. They do have, generally speaking, some training in the food industry, probably a degree in food and beverage, and they have to do extenuous reports. So everyone's thinking, well, I'd love to be a Michelin star inspector. Well, it's not that glamorous, because the problem being is that these inspectors are anonymous, so you don't get to be able to tell restaurants, hey, give me the best service or give me the best food. Also, when they go to a restaurant, they are actually, they don't get to order what they want to. They're actually required to order, based on what Michelin tells them to order. And you're doing this every day, and you don't get to choose the restaurant. So you're always thinking to yourself, wow, it'd be glamorous. It's not that glamorous, because they also have to go and eat a lot of food and stay in a lot of hotels that might not be in the rated Michelin guide. So you're probably like 90% of the time eating at places that are not that great. And that 10% you get to go to a really great restaurant. But it's a job. It's not all that it's cut out to be, because I've always thought about that. Wow, that'd be great to retire and become a Michelin star inspector. I think it's a lot of work, because you actually have to write reports every day. For the restaurants, you have to go every day. It's not like, I don't feel good, so I don't want to go to this restaurant. I don't eat this stuff, so I don't want to go. That doesn't happen. It's a job. And they are anonymous, and they do a lot of work. And in general, food inspectors their career doesn't last that long, because of course you burn out. So it's not like a lot of inspectors, and I don't think they're not like 20-year, 30-year inspectors. Probably average is about 5 to 6 years. I read somewhere that Michelin inspectors on average eat around 250 anonymous meals a year. They stay 160 nights in hotels, and they make right over 1,000 reports a year. So that's a lot, because you have to consider you're not always on the job. You have times when you're off the job. So it's a really focused job. So you really have to love what you're doing. But also you have to understand that not every place, hotel, or restaurant they go to is Michelin star. And in fact, most aren't. So most of their food experiences are probably less than pleasurable. Let's go through the criteria for the stars, because we also have to understand that there are certain criteria, and when we'll get to the end, I'll talk about what this all means. So 3-star restaurant means it's an exceptional cuisine and it's worth a special journey. So you should probably make a trip. For instance, if Vancouver has a 3-star restaurant, it'd be worth it for you to actually focus your trip around that restaurant visit. 2 stars means exceptional cooking worth a detour. That means, if you're in the area near like Seattle and you can come up here, yeah, it'd be worth it. And then 1 star is high quality cooking worth a stop. That means if you're visiting Vancouver, then, you should check it out if you can. And again, going back to Bib Gourmand means it's has good cooking and it's got some value. And then there's a green star rating, which is for restaurants that have good cuisine, but also have a focus on sustainability. It's important to note that Michelin hands out stars based on 5 criteria: quality of product, mastery of flavor and cooking techniques, the personality of the chef represented in the dining experience, the harmony of flavors, and the consistency between inspectors' visits. So knowing this criteria, I can understand why like chain restaurants or sometimes Chinese cuisine restaurants have difficulty getting stars, because if you have, as compared to French restaurants that have a focal point on the chef, if you don't have a focal point on a chef, then it's hard to figure out what that personality is. The other thing that's interesting is that Michelin always says, because there's some chefs that say, I don't want to have stars, or I'll give back my star. And Michelin always says, well, the star doesn't belong to the chef, it belongs to the restaurant. That to me doesn't make any sense because one of the criteria is the personality of the chef. And to me, the star is earned by the chef, not by the restaurant. So in my mind, once a chef comes out of a restaurant, they can't really say they're a Michelin star chef anymore. And so I see that a lot where people say, well, listen, this is a 1-star Michelin chef. Technically speaking, once he leaves that restaurant, he actually loses the star because the criteria of that is entails the personality of the chef, which he still has, but has to do with the quality of the product of that restaurant. So if you don't have the restaurant and the chef together, you actually, in my mind, lose the star. There's always arguments about the validity, what this means. People are right. This is fairly arbitrary because they have certain criteria and certain tastes. But it's very influential because I know from my perspective, when I go to any city, I trust Michelin and I trust their standards and I always look at it. That's the first list I ever look at. Subsequently, there's lists like the top 50 and other lists that I've seen. But I really think this is the best list possible. I don't know this for a fact, but I feel that other lists are based a lot on, marketing and who the chef knows. So I do have some degree of trust of Michelin because they are the longest standing rating. So it has a huge effect on the market. The difficulty with that is once there's good and bad. When, for instance, Michelin now comes into a city like Vancouver, it's great. The positive is that we get a lot more focus. There's going to be more tourism. People are going to come to Vancouver and we're going to be seen as a culinary focal point. So that's great in terms of the attention that we get. The bad part of that is there is a huge amount of pressure on chefs now to get stars because if you know that there's an industry within the culinary community. It's embarrassing if you're seen as a good chef not to have a star. And so they have to almost meet criteria and there's a real pressure to do that because it's kind of like just being in a club. Oh, if all your friends are in the club and you're not in there, there's a huge pressure. But getting a star does mean that your menus kind of do change to cater to these type of tastes. So for instance, if you don't have a star, if you want to keep your star, you have to constantly change your menu. You have to show different techniques when maybe you just want to cook good food. You have to show harmony. You have to show quality of products. They focus on localized products. There's many things, many restaurants that change their menus to focus on stars. And you can fault them for that, but in a way you can't because they have to survive. And, unfortunately, whenever you have a city that has a Michelin guide, once you have a star rating system, the perception is the 3-star restaurant is better than a 2-star, is better than 1-star. And it means a lot for the restaurant to get a star. It's a huge amount of business. Some people estimate that a star is worth maybe between 20 to 100% of increase in business. So that's a huge amount for any restaurant, knowing that a lot of restaurants are not that profitable in the first couple of years. I think it's also important to keep this in perspective. I love Michelin star chasing. I love that whole process. But having said that, let's not go overboard here. It doesn't mean, again, that a 3-star Michelin restaurant is better than a 2-star, is better than a 1-star, and that any restaurant that doesn't get a star, doesn't get a mention, is like lousy. That's not what it means. There's certain criteria, and generally it's skewed towards, especially at the 3-star and 2-star level, very high-end, probably like old world French type service with extensive wine lists. That's not every restaurant. You can have a perfectly fine restaurant in your neighborhood that you enjoy. And if it's not rated by Michelin, that doesn't mean that it's not a good restaurant. There's a certain rating, there's a certain system, and it's fun to chase them, it's fun to debate, but that really shouldn't change your system. I will say that most of the time with Michelin star restaurants, in my experience, you do get more creative cuisine. You get much more aesthetically pleasing cuisine. So if you're a person that actually just likes meat and potatoes, the Michelin star kind of system is not really for you. If you're a person that likes surprise, innovation, you don't mind different textures in your mouth, you'll love it. And that's what you'll find a lot of people in their ratings on TripAdvisor and Yelp. You'll find they say, well, this is kind of strange. That's what you're getting with sometimes 3-star and 2-star Michelin restaurants. You're getting innovation. You're getting differences in texture. So if you're a person that's kind of finicky about food and doesn't like to try things that are that new or out of your comfort level, you might be a little disappointed, especially with the 3-star and 2-star experience, because in general, those are pretty expensive experiences, but they're meant to kind of open your mind and to let the chef as an artist speak to you. And some people say, no, I don't want that. I just want like nice food. I want my prime rib. I want my nice, well-cooked fish. I like what I like. And so for you, maybe the Michelin star restaurant system doesn't mean very much. I hope this video has been useful. I am far from an expert of Michelin stars or Michelin restaurants or Michelin anything. But all I can tell you is that I have been to a number of Michelin star restaurants in a number of jurisdictions. I've enjoyed the experience every time. It really is fun for me to say I'm going to Michelin. It does heighten your sense of expectation, and you do look forward to it more than, let's say, I was just going to a regular restaurant. It does kind of mean something, and so it's kind of a fun thing for people that are foodies to do that. But again, I wouldn't take it that seriously. I wouldn't discount restaurants that are not in the Michelin Guide, and kind of take a very even keel approach. It's all fun, it's all good. When you get to eat at restaurants that are Michelin rated, it's a blessing almost any time, even if it's not the best experience, or I think that maybe it's not up to what I think should be a Michelin star. That's kind of just a fun debate. It's always a blessing to be able to eat in these type of restaurants. Hope you found this useful, this video useful. Until next time, happy eating.